Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com, on Roku, Dwyer Boxing and Sports News. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Well, this weekend was rocky for me. The Boo Birds, this is your opportunity to come out. I thought Johnny Gonzalez, the champion, would take care of Gary Russell, who I thought was going to linger in the pocket too much, right? And was going to succumb to Johnny Gonzalez's power, right? Gary Russell took Johnny Gonzalez's title. The second play I had for this weekend was a long shot play. I wasn't expecting to win it, did not win it, but the fight was very one-sided. I thought JoJo Dan had a chance to stretch this fight to the distance. And I thought at 20-1 odds, the casino was more than compensating me for the risk. Right? Kell Brook looks spectacular. We'll talk about it. Two more fights I want to just touch on. The Edes fight. First time I've seen him. Hope I'm not butchering his name too much. This just happened to be one of the fights on the undercard on the program I was watching as I was waiting for the Kell Brook fight to start. Right? He got KO'd for the first time in his career by a 40-year-old opponent, Kaminsky. Right? Then, of course, there's one more fight, and I think it deserves mention here. Right? Charlo's win over Martirosyan. I have some thoughts about that. Well, let's get after it. I thought the performance of Saturday night was Gary Russell's victory over Johnny Gonzalez. Understand, Kell Brook was also spectacular. But Kell Brook's opponent wasn't one of the hardest punchers in the sport. That's who Johnny Gonzalez is. So as I watched the fight, I thought, okay, Gary has the hand speed. We knew that, right? Johnny Gonzalez wasn't opening up early. He was trying to figure out the hand speed. Right? He was fighting a little bit small, right? Wasn't using length, but was crouched down. Didn't want to get hit with anything. Wanted to have some defensive construct up. And then I thought Johnny Gonzalez started coming forward. Now, Gary Russell is lingering around the pocket, right? So I thought, okay, when Gonzalez figures out his entry point, he's going to be able to land some hard shots. Then something incredible happened. Truly incredible. And it shocked me, surprised me. You know, Gary Russell really was fearless in this fight. Right? There were a couple of times where Johnny Gonzalez throws huge right hands. And Gary Russell just leans back. Right? Picture a guy fighting Vladimir Klitschko. Vladimir Klitschko is throwing some big right hands, and the guy, while hanging around the pocket, just leans back. Right? Gary Russell leans back. It's shocking, because keep in mind, Johnny Gonzalez is a guy who took out Abner Maris in one round, who went to Japan and took out Hasegawa early. Right? Gary Russell just leans back, and Johnny Gonzalez's right hands end right here. I'm not kidding. So I was watching the fight, and as I saw that, I have to tell you, I thought, wow, what's Gary doing? Then I thought, okay, this is just a matter of time before Johnny gets this KO. Because you can't truly believe that you're going to be in the ring with a heavy puncher and just lean on him, right? Lean back. Keep in mind, this is a little bit different than Vitaly Klitschko because Gary Russell's not the tallest man in the gym, right? But that's what Gary Russell was doing. And Gary Russell was effective with it. Then Gary Russell drills Johnny Gonzalez with a perfect straight left hand. Russell's a southpaw, and the world changes. I pointed out in the pre-fight video that Johnny Gonzalez doesn't have the best chin, right? He's been stopped in some fights where he's been ahead. Look at his record, you'll see multiple KOs, right? He's the one getting KO'd. But I wasn't expecting that here, but that's what I got. because Johnny is so unprepared for the power shots that when he hits the canvas, he doesn't even hit the canvas naturally. He doesn't look like he's bracing for a fall. In other words, he's hit with shots he barely sees, and then he's tumbling to the canvas awkwardly, looking embarrassed, right? That's when you know a guy was unprepared for what hit him, right? Gary Russell, after drilling him with a nice straight left hand, then of course is able to use hand speed, take care of the rest of the problem, right? Now I'll say this, Russell wins the fight for the rest of Gary Russell's life. He'll be called champion, right? The rest of his life, that's the beauty of winning a boxing title, right? I will say this, and you can read into this whatever you want in reference to the Pacquiao-Mayweather fight, right? When you're fighting a guy with great hand speed, you're at risk in the early rounds while you're figuring out the angles, right? Johnny Gonzalez never got a chance to fully figure out the angles because Gary Russell closed the show and was fearless in the pocket defensively, right? I mean, Russell's fast to begin with. When Gary's just leaning back as you're throwing shots and then coming back, he's even faster, right? I tip my hat to Gary Russell. I wasn't expecting that. He caught Johnny Gonzalez before Gonzalez got heated up. I do wonder what would happen if they had a rematch, right? Because I believe once you solve the speed, then I think you get into other areas, right? Johnny Gonzalez never solved the speed, right? Russell was just too fast for him. It was jarring. I congratulate Gary Russell. That was a swing and a miss on that fight for me. Let's talk about Kell Brook against JoJo Dan. Let me say this. You know, I know there are many here online, and I read a lot of stuff here online, right? BoxingNews24.com. Scott Guilford, right, for example, who believes that JoJo Dan is a bum, that, Kell Brook was cherry-picking opponents. I know Amir Khan has issued statements saying, I'm waiting for Kell Brook to fight quality opponents, right, etc. I'll say this. I think JoJo Dan was major competition. JoJo Dan is a guy who, in my opinion, certainly beat, Selkuk Edes in the first fight. He definitely won that fight. I know the judges saw it differently. Okay, whatever, right? JoJo Dan went into this fight with really only contested losses, right? Understand, too, Kell Brook didn't cherry-pick anybody. His sanctioning body told him, this is your mandatory contender, right? So I believe we have a lot of revisionist history going on here. Let me say this, too. I know JoJo Dan looked bad, right? JoJo Dan's own corner pulls the plug in this fight. Okay, great. I'll be looking at JoJo Dan in future fights because the time to bet on a guy is when he falls out of favor with the public, right? JoJo Dan just ran into an excellent fighter with excellent timing. Let's talk about Kell Brook for a moment. And I thought it was interesting because I thought JoJo Dan went for it. Now, JoJo Dan is a slick fighter. He's slick. And he's the kind of guy who moves his upper body, right? So he's in front of Kell Brook, and he's actually moving. He's moving his upper body. He's moving. He's choking me up. But he's also moving, right, like this. He's not a potted plant. He's not standing there, with a hit me please sign on. He's moving. Here's the problem. This is what makes Kell Brook great. Kell Brook has fast hands, that's a given. But Kell Brook has short punches, right? There isn't a lot of wind-up. It's short punches. And his body control is phenomenal. In other words, he's getting huge leverage Huge leverage on shots where it looks like he's just going like this. Right? He's getting huge leverage. He's loading up. So it's amazing because, of course, JoJo Dan's going like this. Kell Brook just comes in, times it. His timing is perfect. Throws a lead power shot. Throws a lead right hand. Right? And nails JoJo Dan. Hits him on the button. JoJo Dan's trying to get a shoulder in the way, shoulder roll and all this other stuff. Kell Brook's able to hit him right here. Right? JoJo Dan, I've seen him in with punchers like Edes. Right? Huge punchers. I've never seen him as surprised by an opponent's punching power as he was by Kell Brook. Right? Just like Johnny Gonzalez, when he goes down, when JoJo Dan goes down, you can tell from his feet he doesn't know what hit him. Right? In other words, this is not the kind of thing where the guy says, uh-oh, here comes a left hand. It hits him. He's falling back. He understood this was possible. He has a hand down to brace his fall. No, JoJo Dan is of the, he's bobbing and weaving. Here's the punch he hasn't seen. Next thing you know, he's tumbling on the canvas. Dominant performance. Looked like he had been in a car crash. But let's look closely at Kell Brook for a moment. If you compare and contrast this film with Kell Brook against Matthew Hatton, you're going to notice that Kell Brook's moving more against Matthew Hatton than he is here. Right? I believe we're getting a snow job. I don't buy the machete attack story. I think the story's bogus. Right? Don't get me wrong. Kell Brook's, hurt by a machete. But I find it curious that they haven't arrested the alleged perpetrator. I find the idea of a championship boxer being in some building and then suddenly a guy hops out the weeds with a machete, I find that story to be implausible. Right? Also, I notice I'm looking at Kell Brook in the ring, and Kell Brook's not really moving around because JoJo Dan's trying to take the fight to him. As I said, JoJo Dan went for it. He just got blown out. Right? I'd like to see Kell Brook in a fight where he actually has to dance around the ring. Right? I find it interesting that Kell Brook, and I thought his post-fight interview is one of the very best I have ever seen. Right? I thought it's a great moment when Eddie Hearn hops in the ring, points to Kell Brook's belt, and says, why doesn't Amir Khan want to fight us? It'd be for championship. I thought that was a great moment. Right? But I'll say this, I find it curious that Kell Brook now is openly calling out Amir Khan and stuff like that after this fight. Right? My point to you is I didn't see Kell Brook moving around the ring a lot in this fight. I still wonder whether a guy with more than 30 metal staples in his leg is completely healed. It's only in boxing that they try to sell you on the idea that a guy could be, attacked with a machete, get over 30 metal staples in his leg, and then be ready to fight a few months later. Right? If this were any other sport, right? If this were track and field, and you heard that Usain Bolt got attacked with a machete, right, and had, dozens, literally, of metal staples in his leg, you wouldn't buy it if they said to you, oh, he's going to race again in, 4 months. Right? You'd say, come on, that sounds ridiculous. That's the story they pushed here. Now, Kell Brook looked great, but he didn't move around the ring a lot. I'd like to see him in a fight where he actually is moving around the ring. Sometimes boxers get injured, and then they call out the biggest opponents possible because they understand, right? They understand that they need to cash in as quickly as possible. Right? Keep an eye on the Kell Brook story. He looked great. But he didn't move around the ring like vintage Kell Brook. I'll say that. Let's move a little bit further. This Edes fight shocked me. I'd never seen the kid before. The kid's in the ring. I immediately didn't like a few things, right? He seemed to be too upright. You know, I like guys who bend and stuff like that. I actually appreciated Jojo Dan's effort to move his upper body, right? This guy doesn't move his upper body that much, right? He's stiff-legged. He's not slick enough. He's there to get hit. Now, I'll say this. Guys can come back from losses. Great fighters. Marquez, Hopkins, Vladimir Klitschko bounce back from losses. Julian Jackson, back in the day, right? If Edes is the real deal, he'll be able to bounce back. Here's why I think his career's in real jeopardy, right? It's his reflexes. Understand, in boxing, as fighters age, they learn more about themselves. They learn more about the sport, right? The problem, though, is the reflexes start to go. So you have fighters like Ali talking about how he reached a point in his career where he could see the punches. He knew what to do. He just couldn't get out the way. Now, I'm watching this kid in his 20s, young kid, in his 20s. And you know the rest. That right hand that he gets dropped with is not the first right hand that lands on him in the fight. Now, you know how it is. Young guy, a bit too bold. He gets hit with the right hand on the side of the face. You're young. You're in your early to mid-20s. He's laughing it off. He's looking macho and stuff like that. Here's the problem. I didn't see the guy have any recognition of the fact that punches like that were coming, right? I mentioned Gary Russell earlier, right? Johnny Gonzalez throws a couple of hard right hands. Gary Russell's ready. He's moving, right? So the punch comes. Here's the punch. Here's Gary Russell, right? You know, Gary's moving. Gary's, sensing the punches on the way in. He has the reflexes, right? Edes doesn't have the reflexes. So he gets hit flush with right hands. I don't see him even turning away. There's no roll. There's no effort to duck. It's not like the guy is moving out the way and he still gets caught with the punch. No, this guy is just standing there and he's getting hit with shots. Right? If you have those kind of reflexes, you don't have a long-term boxing career. Let me also say, too, his feet. You know the kind of feet that work in the sport of boxing, right? Manny Pacquiao has great legs, right? Floyd Mayweather has great legs. These are guys who move their legs, hide what they're doing, fake like they're coming in, feints and all this other stuff, right? Some guys will even shuffle in the ring. So you're looking at their feet, you don't know what's going on. You're confused, right? You can't tell what the guy's setting up for. I'm looking at this young kid, Edes, and his feet are too obvious. You know what he's doing. He's up on his toes. He's methodical. He's too methodical. Let me say this. Sometimes you have to blow up your style and rework your game. That's where this kid is. He got knocked out. What he's going to have to do is he's going to have to rework his game. The worst thing he could do is to fight this guy again in a rematch, right? He has to say to himself, you know what? I'm too robotic. He needs to look at film. If he doesn't have the reflexes, he needs to work his defense where he has a hand up, right? I think that guy really is at a crisis point in his career, right? We only assume that guys in their, 20s have forever to improve, right? They don't. If you don't have great reflexes and if you don't establish a foundation, if you don't establish the good habits early, I believe you're going to have big problems later. Let me talk about Martirosyan against Charlo. Now, I'll say this. I didn't make a pre-fight video on this fight. I didn't have a dog in the hunt, so to speak. Right? I thought Martirosyan won the fight. I thought he had the faster hands than Charlo. Right? I thought Martirosyan, quite frankly, was a bit slicker than Charlo. right? But I do believe that what Al Bernstein was talking about as it happened on the telecast is true. I feel that Martirosyan was throwing great counters to the body, right? I thought Martirosyan figured out something that before the fight didn't look that way, right? People thought that Charlo was going to dominate when they were on the outside. Martirosyan was actually the one looking better on the outside. And while he was on the outside, he was jumping in with great counters to the body, right? To me, Martirosyan was winning rounds with that formula. Somehow, in the middle of the fight, it got away from him, right? He stopped going to Charlo's body. I believe when Martirosyan looks at the film of this fight, he's going to see that he left a round or two on the table. Because keep in mind, the rounds that Charlo's winning aren't by a wide margin, right? If Martirosyan just landed a few more body shots, I believe this would have been a clear victory for him. Clear. But he let the counters to the body get away from him, right? Then there was a headbutt that kind of stopped the action a little bit. Didn't throw off Martirosyan in that round, but seemed to throw him off in the round after that, right? So I'll say this. I know casual fans are going to look at the result. They're going to see Charlo winner, Martirosyan loser, and they might try to fade Vanes Martirosyan. You need to hold on to Martirosyan, right? He easily could have been awarded the decision in this fight, just like Jojo Dan could have been awarded the decision in the first Edes fight, right? This fight really belongs in that category of not win or loss, but could have been awarded to either fighter. It's a razor close fight. Martirosyan is gifted with excellent hand speed. He's very savvy. Understand the backstory, too, to this fight. Martirosyan used to be with Ronnie Shields. Ronnie Shields is training Charlo, right? Martirosyan used to spar with Charlo. These two guys entered the ring more familiar with each other than the typical matchup. And even with all of that, right, and the fact that Martirosyan, of course, and this is boxing, stuff like this happens, right before the fight changes his trainer, right? With all of this happening in the background, I thought Martirosyan won the fight. Granted, it was close. It was close, but I thought he won the fight. I did think the best moments either fighter had in the fight was Martirosyan going to the body early in the fight. When he gets back to it late in the fight, I thought he, gets back in the saddle and starts to win rounds. The problem is there's about 5 rounds in the middle of this fight where Martirosyan gets away from going to the body. I thought that's what lost him that fight. So, since I'm a little bit of a contrarian, after Saturday's action, understand I'll be looking at Jojo Dan, Johnny Gonzalez, and Vanes Martirosyan in their next fights, right? Because Jojo Dan just happened to run into a guy who might be a great fighter, right? He got caught early, never recovered. That doesn't mean that he doesn't still have the hand speed or the slickness. It just means that against Kell Brook, who throws short punches and who has punching power, it didn't work out for him, right? Jojo Dan should have been more on his back foot, should have forced Kell Brook to use his legs a little bit more. As for Johnny Gonzalez, you know what? When you're in against great hand speed, the first few rounds are going to be tough. Longtime subscribers here online know I think Floyd Mayweather beats Manny Pacquiao. But in countless videos here online, I've said Mayweather has to weather the early rounds, right? Johnny Gonzalez was overwhelmed by Gary Russell's hand speed. Folks, few people in the sport have Gary Russell's hand speed, right? The next guy Johnny Gonzalez fights might have regular hand speed or slightly above average hand speed, right? Gary Russell's hand speed's off the page. right? Johnny Gonzalez, in my opinion, still Johnny Gonzalez. It would have been interesting to have seen what would have happened had this fight gone a few more rounds. Obviously, Gary Russell was not going to let that happen, right? Finally, Vanis Martirosyan, all I could say is that's a coin flip fight. Could have gone either way, right? When I heard the scoring, I was wondering how anyone could have it 7-3 as one of the judges did, right? Vanis Martirosyan has excellent hand speed, has a lot of boxing savvy. The only thing that seems to be a problem for him is that he cuts at times, right? My point to you, though, is apart from the scar tissue, Martirosyan is an excellent fighter. There is a film here online of him sparring with Chavez Jr., and you're going to notice that his hand speed is much faster than Chavez Jr.'s. Martirosyan's a world-class fighter. I'm sure he understands he should have gone to the body a little bit more. That's how I saw Saturday night. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Let me also congratulate the several of you who left comments in the comment section to my pre-fight Johnny Gonzalez Gary Russell video. Right? Many of you said, Dwyer, you're crazy. You need to respect Gary Russell's hand speed a lot more. Right? You win on this. Right? I should have. Russell was magnificent. Let me be one of the first to say Russell's the champion. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Thanks for stopping by.